Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to sift through, well, mountains of information and pull out the insights you can actually use, like right away. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on your daily life, looking at this kind of invisible architecture that shapes almost half of everything you do.
It's a pretty startling figure when you think about it, isn't it? Somewhere between, say, 40 and 50% of what you do each day. Things like brushing your teeth, checking your phone, grabbing that mid-afternoon snack.
Yeah.
It's mostly habit. It's not really conscious choice driving it moment to moment.
Right, and hearing that number, 40 to 50%, it could sound kind of heavy, like we're just robots running on old programming.
Yeah, a lot of people initially feel that way, like, oh, great, my future's already locked in by these habits I don't even notice. But that's really not the takeaway.
Exactly. And that's what we want to dig into today. Our mission really is to show you that this isn't some kind of life sentence. It's actually maybe the most powerful tool you have for making real change. We're moving past that whole fuzzy idea of just trying harder or relying on willpower, which, let's be honest, often fails us.
Right. We're going to extract the actual mechanics of how lasting change happens using the source material we have on this 21-day blueprint idea. We'll break down the neuroscience behind the habit loop, how your brain forms these shortcuts. We'll look at building solid routines, especially for mornings and evenings, and crucially, how to make these new actions stick so they become part of who you are, part of your identity.
And this 21-day thing, we should probably clarify that up front. It's mentioned in the sources, but it's not like magic, right? Day 22 doesn't suddenly mean a habit is locked in forever.
Absolutely not. It's more of a strategic time frame. Habit formation is, well, it's a spectrum. Super simple things, maybe they stick in under 2 weeks. More complex stuff could take months. But 21 days often hits this kind of sweet spot.
A sweet spot. How so?
Well, it works as a sort of micro-commitment. It's long enough that the initial new shiny object enthusiasm starts to fade a bit. You actually have to engage with the process, the discipline. But it's also short enough that you don't get totally bogged down or overwhelmed before you see some progress. It feels more like a sprint you can commit to rather than this endless marathon.
Okay, a manageable sprint. And there's some brain science behind why that timing often works.
Yeah, there is. It's pretty cool, actually. As you keep repeating an action over those, say, 3 weeks maybe, it's going from your bed straight to your running shoes. The actual neural pathway you're carving out starts to get, well, insulated.
Insulated, like with wiring.
Yeah, exactly like wiring. It gets wrapped in this fatty stuff called myelin. Think of it like the plastic coating on an electrical wire. The thicker that myelin sheath gets, the faster and more reliably the signal travels down that nerve pathway. And roughly 3 weeks is often enough time to really kickstart that myelination process. It stamps the pathway clearly enough that doing the action doesn't need so much conscious effort from the thinking part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex. So it's like you're moving a file in your computer, you take it off the main desktop where you have to click it every time, and you put it in the startup folder so it just launches automatically when you boot up.
That's a great analogy. That's precisely the principle. You're automating it.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's start with that core machine, the engine running underneath it all, the habit loop, right? The habit loop. Understanding this is really foundational. It's the invisible engine driving so much of our daily behavior. And the amazing thing is, it's actually pretty simple. Just 3 core parts. The cue, the routine, and the reward. We call it the CRR circuit. This simple loop is behind basically all learned behavior. And once you really grasp how that engine works, you suddenly have very specific levers you can pull to change your own actions.
Okay, 3 parts. Let's start with the first one. The cue. That's the trigger, right? The thing that kicks it all off.
Exactly. It's the spark. The signal that tells your brain, okay, time to run program habit X. And it sounds simple, but cues can be surprisingly sneaky, much more subtle than we often realize. Well, sure, they can be obvious external things like your phone buzzing, that's a cue to check it, or seeing your gym bag by the door, maybe that's a cue to go work out, or even just the time on the clock, like 3 p.m. might be your cue for coffee. But often, the really powerful cues, the ones that drive the habits we struggle with, are internal. It could be an emotion, like feeling bored or anxious. Or it could be physiological, like that slight dip in blood sugar mid-afternoon that suddenly makes you crave something sweet. The key thing is, your brain has learned to associate this specific signal with the start of a sequence that leads to a reward.
The sources had a really good example of this, didn't they? About Daniel, the sales executive, and his cookie habit.
Oh yeah, that's a perfect illustration of a subtle cue. He was really struggling, eating way too many cookies every evening, and he genuinely thought the craving just appeared out of thin air. like a random failure of his willpower.
Which is how it feels sometimes, right?
Yeah, totally. But when they really analyzed his days, almost like detectives looking for clues, a clear pattern emerged. The trigger wasn't the time, it wasn't seeing the cookies, it wasn't even being hungry. His specific cue was the sudden quiet that fell over the house right after his teenagers went up to their rooms after dinner. That shift in atmosphere, that hush, that was the spark.
Wow. Just the silence.
Just the silence. His brain had learned. Quiet equals day is winding down, stress is over, time for comfort and sweetness. He wasn't consciously thinking, oh, silence, time for cookies. But his body registered that environmental shift and boom, the routine kicked in almost automatically.
Which leads us to the second part, the routine. That's the actual behavior itself.
Yep. The action. It could be physical, like walking to the pantry as Daniel did, or mental, like starting to worry about a deadline, or emotional, like defaulting to frustration, scrolling social media, making coffee, lacing up running shoes. All routines. And here's what's fascinating and why habits can feel so automatic and hard to interrupt. Once a habit is really ingrained, the routine often happens in what the sources call neurological silence.
Neurological silence, meaning the conscious brain isn't really involved.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Because the basal ganglia is taken over. This is a much deeper, older part of the brain. Think of it as the brain's autopilot center. It specializes in procedural memory, the how-to of learned sequences, and it's all about speed, accuracy, and crucially, energy conservation.
Ah, energy conservation. The brain is lazy.
Not lazy efficient. The prefrontal cortex, there's the part behind your forehead, responsible for conscious thought, planning, decision-making, novelty. That part uses a ton of energy. So when you're first learning something new, the prefrontal cortex is heavily involved. But once the sequence becomes predictable and practiced, the brain says, okay, this is routine now, let's save energy. And it hands the job downstream to the basal ganglia.
So that's why you can sometimes drive home on a familiar route and suddenly realize you don't remember the last 10 minutes. Your basal ganglia was driving while your prefrontal cortex was thinking about dinner or something else.
Exactly. The routine executed perfectly on autopilot, conserving that precious cognitive energy.
Okay, so cue triggers it. Routine runs almost automatically in the basal ganglia. What locks it in? That's the reward, right?
That's the final piece, the reward. It's the payoff. The thing that tells your brain, hey, that whole sequence, cue, routine, that was worthwhile. Let's remember this loop and do it again next time the cue appears.
So the reward is what makes the habit stick.
Precisely. It's the seal of satisfaction. It could be anything, really. The chemical hit from caffeine or sugar, the feeling of accomplishment after a workout, the distraction from boredom when you scroll Instagram, the stress relief from taking a deep breath. But here's a really critical neurochemical detail we need to grasp. Dopamine, that feel-good neurotransmitter. It doesn't just flood your brain when you get the reward.
Oh, what else?
Crucially, it also surges when the cue appears, and your brain predicts that a reward is coming.
So it's the anticipation itself that feels good.
Yes. That little pulse of dopamine upon seeing the cue is the biological mechanism of craving. It's the brain saying, ooh, good stuff is potentially on the way. Pay attention. For Daniel, the moment that hush fell over the house, bam, a little dopamine hit primed him. It made the idea of the cookie intensely appealing, propelling him towards the pantry almost before he consciously registered, I want a cookie.
Okay, wow. So the craving isn't just this vague feeling. It's a specific dopamine response triggered by the cue, anticipating the reward. That changes things. So if we want to change a habit, we're not just fighting the behavior, we're fighting that anticipatory dopamine hit. That sounds tough.
It is tough if you try to just stop, just white knuckle it.
Yeah.
Because you're fighting deep brain wiring. That's why the most effective strategy usually isn't elimination, it's substitution.
Substitution, meaning replace the routine.
Exactly. You keep the cue the same because trying to eliminate cues is often impossible or impractical. You keep the reward the same, or at least you satisfy the underlying need the original reward was meeting. But you consciously splice in a new routine, you're essentially hijacking the existing loop. You leverage the power of the cue and the craving for the reward, but you redirect the energy into a different, hopefully better, behavior.
So for Daniel, the cue was the hush. The reward he was seeking was hot, comfort, a treat, a transition signal.
Probably a mix of all those. Comfort, sweetness, a ritualistic end to the demanding part of his day. So the substitution strategy wasn't just don't eat cookies. Instead, he kept the cue, the hush, and aimed for a similar reward, comfort, warmth, a pleasant taste, a ritual, but swapped the routine. He started making himself a specific kind of herbal tea, maybe with a tiny bit of honey.
Okay, so the cue, hush, still triggers an action, but the action is now make tea instead of get cookies. And the tea provides a comparable but healthier sense of comfort and ritual.
Precisely. He's using the existing pathway, but rerouting the behavioral track. Now, you raised a good point earlier. Is he just trading one comfort mechanism for another? And yes, to a degree. But the key difference is the impact of the routine and the scale of the reward. The cookies gave a huge sugar rush, a big dopamine spike, potentially disrupting sleep later. The herbal tea provides a milder, gentler sense of satisfaction and warmth without the physiological downsides. He's meeting the need behind the reward, comfort transition, with a lower impact routine. It's retraining his basal ganglia.
Downgrading the chemical hit while still honoring the cue and the underlying need. That makes a lot of sense. It's not about deprivation, it's about smart substitution.
Exactly. And to make that substitution stick, there's another huge factor the sources emphasize: environment.
Right. The stage set for your habits.
You've got it.
Yeah.
We often blame ourselves, our lack of willpower, when really our environment is practically screaming at us to perform the old habit. It's loaded with cues. Think about it like a film director. They don't just rely on actors' willpower. They carefully choose the props, the lighting, the sound, the environment to support the scene they want to create. We need to curate our own environments.
Like the example of Dana, the graduate student.
Perfect example.
Right.
She was trying desperately to build a consistent study habit at her desk at home. But her desk was right next to her gaming setup. Big monitor, flashing lights, maybe sounds from streams. Powerful cues for entertainment, constantly competing with her goal to study.
She was basically in a constant battle with her environment's cues.
Absolutely. Every few minutes, probably. But then, what did she do? She didn't suddenly find superhuman willpower. She simply changed her environment. She started taking her laptop and books to a quiet cafe a couple of blocks away. And suddenly, the study habit that felt impossible at home became almost easy. Why? Because the cafe environment was full of cues supporting study, the quiet hum, seeing others work, the smell of coffee associated with focus. She changed the stage, and the desired action followed much more naturally.
So managing cues often means managing your physical space, making the cues for good habits obvious and the cues for bad habits invisible, or at least harder to access.
That's a huge part of it. Out of sight, out of mind works surprisingly well for cues.
Okay, so we've got the basic machinery. Cue, routine, reward, running on autopilot in the basal ganglia, triggered by cues, reinforced by dopamine. And we can start to manage it through substitution and environmental design. Now let's zoom out a bit. The sources talk a lot about structuring the day using routines, specifically at the beginning and end.
Yeah.
Chapter 10, right, the bookends.
Yes. The bookends, morning and evening routines. These aren't just nice-to-haves. The sources argue they are critical leverage points for shaping your entire day, and there's a solid biological reason why.
Biology.
How so? Well, our bodies run on internal clocks. The big one is the circadian rhythm, that roughly 24-hour cycle governing sleep and wakefulness, hormone release, body temperature, all sorts of things. But we also have shorter cycles called ultradian rhythms, which are roughly 90-minute waves of peak focus followed by dips where we need rest and recovery. Predictable morning and evening routines act like strong anchors for these natural rhythms.
Anchors, meaning they give clear signals to the body about what phase it should be in.
Exactly. Instead of your body relying on random, often disruptive external signals like the jolt of an urgent email first thing or the artificial stimulation of bright screens late at night, you provide consistent, intentional signals. Okay, body, now it's time to gently wake up and activate. Or, okay, body, now it's time to wind down and prepare for rest.
Ooh.
This predictability is incredibly soothing for the nervous system.
And there's another benefit too, right? Something about decision fatigue.
Yes, decision fatigue, or what the sources also call ego preservation. Think of your capacity for making good decisions and exerting self-control, like a muscle, or maybe a limited battery charge.
Okay, like a mental energy tank.
Right. Every single decision you make, no matter how small you wear, what should I wear? What's for breakfast? Which email do I answer first? Should I check social media? Every one of those draws down that limited resource. If you spend the first hour of your day making dozens of tiny, trivial decisions, you've already depleted a significant chunk of your best mental energy before you even get to the important, challenging tasks that require real focus and willpower.
So automating the morning and evening routines means you You basically make those decisions once when you design the routine, and then they run on autopilot, saving that precious decision juice for later.
That's exactly it. You preserve your cognitive bandwidth, your ego, for the parts of the day that are unscripted and demand your full attention and best judgment.
Makes sense. So if we want to build a powerful morning routine, one that really sets us up for success and preserves that energy, what are the essential ingredients? The sources mentioned a kind of trilogy.
They did. The essential trilogy for success for a morning launchpad: movement, stillness, and planning.
MSP.
Movement, stillness, planning. Okay, let's break those down. Movement, why first thing?
Movement does a few key things right at the start. It literally gets your blood flowing, delivering more oxygen to your brain. It helps clear out some of the metabolic waste products that build up overnight. And psychologically, it gives you an immediate sense of accomplishment, a physical win right at the start of the day.
Doesn't have to be a marathon, presumably.
Absolutely not. It could be 5 minutes of stretching, a brisk walk around the block, jumping jacks, yoga, anything that gets the body moving. Then comes stillness.
Stillness. Seems counterintuitive after movement, maybe. You'd think, but it's about balancing activation with centering. Stillness is about intentionally calming the typically frantic morning mind and grounding your emotional state before the day's demands rush in. This could be formal meditation, mindful breathing for a few minutes, prayer, or even just sitting quietly with a cup of tea and staring out the window without distraction.
So calming the internal noise before the external noise begins. And the third part, planning.
Planning. This is about taking control of your agenda before it takes control of you. It doesn't mean scheduling every minute. It means identifying your top 1 to 3 priorities for the day, the things that will make the day feel successful if you accomplish them. Writing them down makes them concrete. This ensures you start the day proactively, focused on your goals, rather than reactively getting pulled into other people's emergencies or random distractions.
Movement, stillness, planning. MSP, it sounds like a solid formula, but you stressed earlier that habits need to fit the person. How does this MSP framework adapt?
Oh, massively. This is crucial. The functions, movement, stillness, planning are the essentials. But the form, how you actually implement them, absolutely must be tailored to your personality, your energy levels, and especially your chronotype. Whether you're naturally an early bird or a night owl.
Right, trying to force a night owl into a super early, high-intensity routine is probably doomed.
It's setting yourself up for failure. The sources give great contrasting examples here. Jackson and Chloe. Jackson's a hardcore lark, naturally up and energetic early, so his movement is a pretty intense 20-minute jog outside. That feels good to him. His stillness is 8 minutes sitting quietly, focusing on his breath, standard mindfulness. His planning is writing down his top 3 work priorities in a journal. It's structured, active, classic morning person stuff.
Okay, that's Jackson. Now, Chloe the night owl, how does she do MSP?
A totally different form, same functions.
Yeah.
Chloe struggles in the early morning, so her movement isn't a jog. It's 10 minutes of gentle mobility stretches she does inside, while her kettle boils for tea. Low impact, just waking the body up. Her stillness isn't formal meditation, where she finds tedious. Instead, she flips through a physical art book or does a quick, aimless sketch for a few minutes while sipping her tea. It engages her visually and calms her mind in a way that feels natural to her creative brain. Enter planning. Not a detailed list, just one single sticky note on her computer monitor with her main creative goal for the day. Simple, focused, low friction.
Wow. So radically different execution, but both are hitting movement, stillness, and planning in a way that works for them. That's key. Function over fixed form.
Exactly. If it feels like a constant battle against your own nature, the habit won't automate, and you lose the energy-saving benefit.
Okay, that covers the morning launchpad. What about the other crucial bookend, the evening wind down? Why is deliberately slowing down just as important?
The evening routine is arguably even more critical for long-term health and performance because it directly impacts sleep quality. Its main job is to signal clearly to your body and nervous system. Okay, the demanding part of the day is over. It's safe to shift gears into repair and rest mode.
Shifting gears.
Yeah.
Like from work mode to rest mode.
Precisely. And a well-designed evening routine typically needs 3 components, similar to the morning: reflection, release, and preparation. RRP.
Okay, RRP, reflection. What does that entail?
Reflection is about closing the mental loops from the day. If you just crash into bed with your mind still racing about unfinished tasks, worries, or conversations, you're going to struggle to sleep deeply. Reflection could be as simple as spending 3 minutes journaling. What went well today? What was challenging? What did I learn? Getting it out of your head and onto paper stops it from ruminating.
Like downloading the day's mental cache so the processor can shut down cleanly?
Great analogy. Then comes release. This is about actively shedding the physical and emotional stress accumulated during the day.
How do you release stress?
It can take many forms, maybe some light stretching or foam rolling. Taking a warm bath or shower, the warmth itself is relaxing. Listening to calming music. Deep breathing exercises. Maybe a brief self-massage on your neck and shoulders. The goal is to consciously shift your nervous system out of the fight-or-flight sympathetic state and into the rest and digest parasympathetic state.
Actively telling your body it's safe to relax. And the final piece, preparation.
Preparation. This is the ultimate gift to your future self, specifically your morning self. It's all about reducing friction for tomorrow's launch pad, laying out your clothes for the next day, packing your lunch, tidying up the kitchen so you don't wake up to chaos, charging your phone away from your bed, setting out your water glass or coffee maker supplies. Each small preparatory action removes a decision point or obstacle from the next morning.
So you wake up with fewer things demanding immediate attention and willpower.
Exactly. And physiologically, these wind-down activities, the warmth, the gentle movement, the quiet reflection, they actually help your body's natural cooling curve that needs to happen for sleep onset. Melatonin release is triggered by darkness and a slight drop in core body temperature. Contrast that with the most common evening routine killer, blasting your eyes with blue light from screens right before bed. That blue light actively suppresses melatonin production and tells your brain it's still daytime, completely sabotaging your natural sleep signals.
Right. So the wind down is about signaling rest, while screens signal alert. Big conflict there.
Huge conflict.
Yeah.
Designing that evening RRP routine is crucial for maximizing recovery and setting up the next day.
Okay, this is really practical stuff. Build the morning MSP and evening RP routines as stable anchors. Here's where it gets really interesting, though. What happens next? You've got these routines, maybe a new habit is starting to feel okay, but then you hit a wall, right? Things stall.
Ah, yes, the dreaded plateau paradox. This trips up so many people. You're making great progress, feeling good about the new habit, and then suddenly it feels like you're stuck. No more improvement, maybe the motivation dips. It feels like failure.
Yeah, that's usually when I might quit something.
Exactly. But the sources are clear. This plateau usually doesn't mean you're failing. It often means your brain has shifted gears into a consolidation phase.
Consolidation, meaning it's working behind the scenes.
Precisely. Remember that myelination we talked about?
Yeah.
Wrapping the neural pathway. That takes energy and resources, but it doesn't necessarily show up as external progress you can easily measure day to day. Your brain is busy making the habit more efficient, more automatic, locking it down. And counterintuitively, this moment of consolidation when the initial habit is starting to feel more automatic but maybe a bit boring is the scientifically perfect time to introduce the next level.
Stacking.
Stacking, like adding another habit on top of the one that's solidifying. Exactly. Layering a new related habit directly onto an existing established one. It's the key to building momentum and complexity without getting overwhelmed.
Okay, so instead of starting a completely separate new habit from scratch, you leverage the foundation you've already built. How does the science of that work? Why is stacking effective?
It works through a few really smart mechanisms that tap into how the brain already operates. The first is associative cueing.
Associative cueing.
Yeah, the completion of the first habit becomes the direct, immediate cue for the second habit. It creates a seamless chain reaction. The classic example is dental hygiene. Brushing your teeth, habit 1, becomes the cue to floss, habit 2. The fresh, minty feeling from brushing triggers the thought, okay, next step is floss.
Ah, so one action reliably signals the start of the next. The brain loves that kind of predictable sequence.
It really does. It follows the path of least resistance. The second mechanism is dopaminergic chaining.
Dopamine again.
Always comes back to dopamine. When you successfully complete that first habit in the stack, even if it's small, you get a little hit of dopamine, that feeling of satisfaction, of task complete. That small neurochemical reward actually primes your brain, making you slightly more motivated and receptive to starting the next action in the chain. It lubricates the transition.
So the win from habit #1 fuels the start of habit #2. Cool. What's the third mechanism?
This one's about long-term efficiency, temporal compression.
Temporal compression. Sounds fancy.
It just means that over time, as the stacked habits become really automatic, your brain starts to perceive them not as separate actions, but as one single fused cognitive chunk. Think back to driving. A learner driver consciously processes every step. Check mirror, signal, turn wheel, press pedal. But an experienced driver just executes turn left as one smooth, integrated unit. Those discrete actions is compressed into a single block.
Okay, so the individual steps blur into one routine.
Exactly. And when that happens, it frees up a ton of mental bandwidth. Your brain isn't juggling multiple separate tasks anymore. It's running one efficient program.
Which means it now has the capacity to potentially add another small layer to the stack without feeling overloaded.
Precisely. If brush teeth and flaws have compressed into a single 3-minute dental care chunk that runs on autopilot, maybe now you can easily stack on use mouthwash or scrape tongue without feeling like it's a huge effort. You build complexity incrementally.
That makes sense, but it also sounds like a potential recipe for disaster if you try to stack too much too soon. How do you find the right balance? How big should the next habit in the stack be?
Crucial question. This is where the Goldilocks zone comes in, combined with the principle of progressive overload borrowed from physical training. The absolute key, according to the sources, is always, always start with the minimum viable dose, MVD, the smallest possible version of the habit you want to add.
Minimum viable dose, so like ridiculously small.
Yes, almost laughably small sometimes. If you want to start reading more, the MVD isn't read for 30 minutes. It might be read one paragraph. If you want to start exercising, it's not go to the gym for an hour. It might be do one push-up or put on running shoes and walk to the end of the driveway. You make it so easy you almost can't not do it. You maintain consistency with that tiny MVD until it feels completely automatic, almost weird not to do it.
You're building the pattern first, not aiming for impressive results immediately.
Exactly. Consistency over intensity, especially at the start. Once that MVD is automatic, then you apply progressive overload. You gradually increase the duration or difficulty, but only slightly. Maybe one paragraph becomes 2, then a page. One push-up becomes 2, then 5. And the way to gauge if the increase is right, the sources suggest the 90% confidence rule.
90% confidence?
Yeah. You should only increase the habit to a level where you feel 90% confident you can successfully do it, even on your worst, busiest, lowest energy day. If you're thinking of scaling up to 30 minutes of meditation, but you only feel, say, 50% confident you can manage that on a chaotic Tuesday, it's too big a jump. Scale back to maybe 10 minutes where you feel 90% sure you can hit it no matter what.
That's a fantastic rule of thumb. It takes the pressure off trying to be a hero every day and focuses on sustainable consistency. Build the floor, not just reach for the ceiling.
Perfectly put. Build the floor, because life will inevitably throw curveballs at you. And that leads directly to another crucial concept for making habits last. Elasticity versus abandonment.
Elasticity, meaning the habit needs to stretch and bend without breaking when life gets crazy.
Exactly. Too often we design these rigid, perfect routines, and the first time life gets disrupted, travel, illness, a family emergency, a huge deadline, the routine shatters completely and we feel like we failed and just abandoned the habit altogether. Fell off the wagon.
Yeah, the all or nothing trap.
Right. Elastic design means building in flexibility from the start. When chaos hits, the goal isn't necessarily to perform the full habit perfectly. The goal is to preserve the neural thread. Keep the connection alive, even if barely.
Okay, how does that work practically? Let's use an example. Say my established habit is writing for 60 minutes every morning after my coffee. Then I get hit with jet lag and a massive, unexpected work project that swamps my mornings.
Okay, perfect scenario for elasticity. Instead of saying, well, I can't do 60 minutes, so I'll do 0, you identify the core of the habit. The identity you're building is writer. The action is writing. So on those crazy jet lag mornings, you perform the minimum viable version. Maybe that's opening the document and writing just 5 sentences. Maybe it's writing one single paragraph. Maybe it's just reviewing yesterday's work for 2 minutes. The point is, you do something. You maintain the link between the cue, coffee, and the action. You keep the pathway warm.
So the brain doesn't register habit broken. It registers habit scaled down due to circumstances?
Exactly. The thread remains intact. You haven't abandoned the identity. You've just adapted the expression of it to the current reality. This reframes disruptions not as failures, but as opportunities to practice resilience.
That's a powerful shift. And this idea of starting small, stacking, and being elastic, it can lead to huge results over time, right? The compounding effect, like the story of Matteo.
Well, Matteo's story is fantastic for illustrating this. He was a PhD student, totally swamped, feeling like he had 0 time for pleasure reading, which he missed. He knew adding an hour was impossible, so he started with the tiny MVD stack. After tying his shoes each morning, established routine, the cue, he would read just 1 paragraph of a novel, new routine.
1 paragraph? That's seriously minimal.
Almost absurdly so. But it was 90% confidence easy. He never missed. And because it was consistent, it started to compound. That one paragraph often felt good, so it naturally stretched into a page sometimes. Reading sparked ideas, so we added another tiny stack. Journaling just 3 quick sentences about what he read. Then, because he was enjoying this pocket of non-academic thinking, he started guarding his lunch break more fiercely, swapping mindless emails, scrolling to 20 minutes with his novel. Fast forward 6 months, that initial one-paragraph habit had snowballed. He'd finished reading 8 novels, felt less stressed, get this, had broken through a block and finished a difficult chapter of his dissertation. All stemming from that ridiculously small initial commitment.
Wow, the power of the tiny, consistent domino push. Incredible.
It truly is. The small hinges swing big doors, but only if they swing consistently.
So what does this all mean then? We've journeyed through the mechanics of the habit loop, CRR, the importance of structuring our days with bookend routines, MSP, RRP, and how to grow habits through stacking and elasticity, MVD 90% rule. What's the ultimate point of all this engineering? Where does it lead?
It leads to the most profound change of all, the identity shift. This is the end game. Moving beyond simply doing a behavior to fundamentally being the kind of person who embodies that behavior.
So not just I'm trying to exercise, but I am an active person. Not I'm attempting to eat better, but I am someone who nourishes my body.
Exactly. You shift from I'm trying to meditate to I am a meditator. When the behavior becomes woven into the fabric of your self-concept, your identity, the whole dynamic changes. It stops feeling like an obligation you have to force yourself to do, and it starts feeling like a natural expression of who you are.
You're no longer fighting your own self-image. You're acting in alignment with it. That sounds much less effortful in the long run.
It is. The friction reduces dramatically, and the sources are incredibly emphatic about the one non-negotiable tool for accelerating and cementing this identity shift: celebration.
Celebration. Okay, this sounds nice, but maybe a bit fluffy. How critical is it really?
It's not fluffy at all. It's pure neurochemistry. It's absolutely crucial for memory consolidation and identity formation. When you consciously take a moment to acknowledge and celebrate a success, especially sticking to your intended habit, no matter how small the win, you trigger a release of dopamine.
Dopamine again. So it's not just for craving and reward anticipation.
Nope, it's also the brain's save button or highlighter pen. That celebration-induced dopamine burst effectively flags the preceding action sequence, the successful habit execution, and the associated positive feeling in your brain. It says, hey, this was important, this felt good, prioritize remembering this connection. It helps lock in the learning and associate the new behavior with positive emotion.
Okay, so dopamine highlights the success for memory. What happens if we don't celebrate? If we just complete the habit and move on?
If you just let the accomplishment drift by unnoticed, your brain basically files it under ordinary operations. Like, okay, task done, same as brushing my teeth or breathing. It doesn't get that special neurochemical tag that says, this is significant, this is progress, this is the new me. Celebration provides the proof to your nervous system that the effort was worthwhile and yielded a positive internal state, reinforcing the new identity.
So we need to intentionally mark the wins, but does it have to be a big party every time I floss? What kind of celebration works?
Definitely not big parties. The sources emphasize small, personalized, internal, or readily accessible rituals. Grand, infrequent rewards are less effective for habit formation than frequent, immediate, small acknowledgments. It's about the feeling, not the scale.
Okay, small, immediate acknowledgments, like what?
One simple but powerful one is called the micro-applause. Right after you complete the habit, say you finish your 5 sentences of writing, you physically do something small. Maybe turn your palms up slightly, take a breath, and silently or quietly say to yourself, yes, or done, or good job. It's a tiny physical anchor for the feeling of success.
A little internal high five. I like that. What else?
Another one, which can feel a bit vulnerable but is very powerful for rewiring self-perception, is the mirror test.
The mirror test. Sounds intense.
It can be, initially.
Yeah.
The practice is simple.
Yeah.
Literally stand in front of a mirror, make eye contact with yourself, really look into your own eyes and say, sincerely, I'm proud of you for doing the habit, or just, I'm proud of you.
Ooh, yeah, that feels potentially awkward. Why is looking yourself in the eye and saying that so effective, or maybe so difficult?
It's often difficult because many of us have a deeply ingrained inner critic. Our nervous system might have been conditioned, perhaps from childhood, to believe that self-praise is arrogant or undeserved unless we achieve something monumental, or maybe even unsafe because it could lead to complacency or judgment. The mirror test directly confronts that conditioning. It physically teaches your nervous system, through your own eyes and voice, that receiving self-acknowledgement and pride is safe, acceptable, and necessary. It bypasses the inner critic and reinforces the identity of someone worthy of pride for their efforts, even small ones.
Wow. Reprogramming that internal feedback loop, that's deep.
Hmm?
Any other rituals?
One more tangible one is the identity certificate. This involves actually writing down, maybe on an index card or a journal, a short statement like, today, date, I have embodied the identity of a writer, runner, meditator, etc., by a specific habit performed. And then maybe even signing it. It sounds a bit formal, maybe even silly, but creating that physical artifact provides concrete evidence for your subconscious mind. It's a declaration of the new identity you are actively building and reinforcing.
Micro applause, mirror test, identity certificate. Different ways to consciously tag the success and build that feeling of, I am this kind of person now.
Exactly. It's about making the internal shift explicit and tangible.
Okay, so celebration wires in the success. But we know slips happen. We talked about elasticity. How do we connect that back to identity? How does handling a slip reinforce, rather than shatter, this new identity we're celebrating?
This is absolutely critical for long-term success and ties back into Chapter 13 context from the sources. The key is reframing the slip. A slip, missing a workout, eating the cookie, skipping meditation, is not a referendum on your character. It's not proof that you failed or that the new identity isn't real. It is simply data. It's information. Maybe the habit was too big. Maybe the cue was unexpected. Maybe you needed more rest.
Well, analyze, don't agonize.
Precisely. And then crucially, perform a micro-recovery action as quickly as possible.
Yeah.
There seems to be a short window, maybe 20 minutes or so, after a slip before the negative feeling really solidifies into a story like, see, I knew I couldn't do it. I always give up.
That window is for immediate course correction.
Yes, tiny course correction. If you missed your planned run, don't just wallow. As soon as you realize it, maybe drop and do 30 seconds of jumping jacks or a quick plank. If you broke your no sugary drinks rule, maybe immediately go drink a large glass of water. The specific action is less important than the immediacy and the symbolism. It's a gesture that says, okay, that happened, but I'm back on track now.
And that immediate micro-recovery does what for the identity?
It proves unequivocally that you are the kind of person who recovers quickly. You're not defined by the slip. You're defined by the rapid return. You are resilient. Every time you perform that micro-recovery, you are strengthening the identity of someone who doesn't get derailed by imperfection. You're building anti-fragility, the ability not just to bounce back, but potentially to get even stronger from the disruption because you learned something and practiced recovery.
So slips become training opportunities for the resilient recoverer identity. That flips the script entirely.
It really does. It's about progress, not perfection, and building the identity of someone who keeps going, even when things aren't perfect.
This has been such a rich deep dive. We've gone from the nuts and bolts of the cue routine reward loop to architecting our days with morning and evening bookends, using MSP and RRP, learning how to grow sustainably with stacking and elasticity using MVD and the 90% rule, and finally cementing it all through the power of celebration and building an anti-fragile identity.
It really covers the full arc, doesn't it? From the micromechanics in the brain to the macro level of self-concept. And perhaps the biggest single takeaway, the most empowering idea from all of this, is realizing that shift. The shift from feeling like you're constantly trying to do the habit to feeling like you simply are the habit. When that happens, your future stops feeling like something left to chance or dependent on fickle willpower that comes and goes. Instead, you realize your future is something you are actively building by design. One small, intentional, celebrated, self-affirming action at a time. You basically got the blueprint now for constructing that future self.
A blueprint for the whole wall, as you said earlier, which leads to the challenge for everyone listening, right? Now that you have this blueprint, what's the very next step? Not the whole plan, not the grand vision.
No, the challenge is,
Mm.
what is the next tiny, almost trivial action you will take? The very next domino you will push right now or schedule for tomorrow morning. Identify it specifically. What's the cue? What's the minimum viable routine?
And maybe just as importantly, how will you celebrate it? What will that immediate micro-celebration look like for you? Will it be the micro-applause? Will you write down your one-sentence identity certificate afterwards? Will you try the mirror test?
Design the celebration right alongside the action. Don't wait for the perfect moment or a bigger achievement. Start wiring in that success feedback loop immediately.
Absolutely. Don't wait for Monday or the first of the month. The knowledge is fresh. The potential is there. The blueprint is in your hands.
So maybe close your notes now, take one conscious breath, and decide on that next tiny domino. Let's keep designing our lives, not by default, but by intention. one ordinary yet potentially extraordinary day at a time.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it valuable. We'll see you next time.
To get more details about Just 21 Days Rewire Habits, Redesign Your Life, click the below link to get the book. Subscribe us to get more content like this.